Hello and welcome to episode 8 of this tutorial. In this episode, I am going to talk about Shadow DOM, CSS scoping, and theming in components. So the goals of this episode is to, first off, I want to, again, talk about Shadow DOM. I know that in episode 1, we, explored Shadow DOM, but I want to revisit the topic and the concept of Shadow DOM because it's kind of important in developing, components in Lit. I want to tell you the importance of, tell you about the importance of Shadow DOM when it comes to scoping the styles of your components. I want to, talk about how we can write scoped CSS styles in components. And I want to use CSS custom properties for example, implementing theming and doing some dynamic styling. And I want to explore composing styles and style parts. So these are the topics of this video. They're very important. In my opinion, they're very important. They allow you to be able to theme your components dynamically. And this is something that we are going to do. In this episode, it's a kind of, advanced, let's say, topic, but we're going to take it one step at a time. We're going to explore everything in full detail. So let's talk about styling our web components in Lit. So by now, we know that each component that we develop in Lit uses something called Shadow DOM by default. And Shadow DOM allows us to isolate the styles of the component from the global styles of the application or from the styles of the page or other components. So each component in Lit using the concept of Shadow DOM can have scoped styles. So styles inside of a component apply only within the shadow root. This is a very important point. I want to talk about this. After going through these points one by one, I want to, get back to this point and talk about this in full detail. So styles inside of a component apply only within the shadow root, no global CSS leakage. So it means, again, that using the components and the concept of Shadow DOM, you can, create styles for components and you can scope those CSS style rules to that single component. So your global styles, that you have defined for the application do not interfere with the scoped style that you have created for that single component. And then for creating styles inside of your components, you know that we use static style CSS to define our component styles. We have already seen that. And then for theming or dynamic styling, we can use CSS custom properties. So if you're familiar with CSS, and I hope you are, you know that in CSS we can create custom properties. And if we want to implement styling and theming, we can use CSS custom properties. And this is something that we're going to do in this episode. And of course, we can do pseudo elements. We can use pseudo elements like parse or theme for external style access as well. Let's talk a little bit about Shadow DOM again. I know that in episode 1 we kind of talked about Shadow DOM, but I think it is worth mentioning the topic of Shadow DOM here as well. So the Shadow DOM is like a capsule for your component. It gives your custom element, for example, book card or book list, a private space to write HTML and CSS so that the styles inside of that capsule, inside of that Shadow DOM, do not interfere with the styles that you have outside that web component. And styles from outside don't mess up the styles of your component. So it's kind of provides you with an isolated capsule, if you will, where you can define your styles, and those styles are scoped to that single component. And the styles that you have defined globally do not interfere with these, scoped styles, and these scoped styles do not interfere with the global styles that you have. So let's say you create a user card element with some styles. This is the, web component. Without Shadow DOM, if someone else adds this CSS to your code, for paragraph tags, right, set the color to red. It might change the colors inside of your user card, but with Shadow DOM, your internal styles are protected. So again, think about this. In your user card component, you've got this paragraph element, right? And if someone adds this style to the application, they might mess up with the style you have defined for the p tags inside of your components. Take a look at the code here. Again, we've got this HTML element, and we are adding the user card to the elements. Because when we develop custom elements or components in Lit, the CSS is scoped. It means that even if someone provides some, I don't know, paragraph, some styles for paragraph tags, this paragraph tag that we have inside of our component is not going to get affected because it uses the scoped styles that it has inside of it. So this is the beauty and the important role that that this topic of shadow DOM plays in your in developing your components. So let's now talk about the second point in the list above, the one that I told you about. I said I want to get back to this point and talk about it in full detail. So then the point was this: styles inside of a component apply only within its shadow root, no global CSS leakage. What does that mean? Again, in Lit, every component, like for example the book card component, uses this shadow DOM by default. So this shadow DOM creates a separate encapsulated DOM tree for that component. It is kind of like a self-contained bubble. And inside of this bubble, the component can have its own HTML and CSS. That CSS is scoped. When we say it is scoped, it means that it only affects the element inside of that component, instead of the shadow DOM of that component. And no global CSS from outside can affect it. And its styles won't leak out to other elements on the page. This is the thing that shadow DOM provides us with: an encapsulated, isolated place where we can define our styles. Shadow DOM provides us with style isolation. Your component styles won't accidentally break the page, and the page's styles won't accidentally mess up with your components. They're kind of isolated from one another. Styles are sandboxed, if you will, inside the component's shadow DOM. Now, as an example again, suppose you've got this global style on the H3 elements, right? And your page has this, title, H3, and then there is this book card component. And inside of the book card, there is another H3 tag. But that H3 tag is not going to use this red color because it's not going to, use the global styles of your application. Even if the book card has an H3 inside of it, the red color won't apply inside of the component unless the component defines it. So this is the concept of scoped styles. Because the H3 inside of the book component lives in the shadow DOM dedicated to that component, and the global CSS can't reach that shadow DOM. This isolation that we get using shadow DOM is perfect. It means that I can develop my web components in isolation without worrying about other styles that the application defines. So again, as a kind of a visual illustration, suppose I've got this H3, right? And this H3 is a style by global CSS. Then I've got the book card component. Then there is this shadow DOM, and then the book card component has another H3 itself. But this H3 is not going to get affected by these global styles, but rather it's going to get affected by the styles that the component itself creates. So this kind of style encapsulation is a major reason web components are powerful, because you do not need to worry about class names collisions. Your component is portable and works the same no matter where you use it, no matter the global styles of your application, and the styles are predictable and controlled. Now, with that out of the way, with this topic of shadow DOM out of the way, let's do some styling on the book card component. So we know the book card component by now, right? So we want to write some scoped CSS inside of the book card component. We want to use CSS variables for colors and fonts, and we want to add the theming feature to this component. So to have a dark mode theme and a light mode theme, and to be able to toggle the theme. So these are the styles that I am going to add to the book card component. This is not a course about CSS. What I am just going to tell you is that I am using CSS variables, right? I'm using CSS variables like, for example, card text color called BG, card shadow, right? And I am going to toggle these based on whether I am using the dark mode or the light mode. But of course, I am going to talk about the host as well as the host dark, as you can see here. So for example, I've got, you see this card BG variable, right? For host, I am defining this as a white color, but for dark mode of our theme, I'm using this color code. Then we've got, for example, color card text color, and then card text color. Changing these values for these CSS variables based on whether the component is rendered using the dark theme or the light theme. So let me go ahead to the book card component. This is the book card component. And of course, we already have some styles here. I'm going to remove these, and I am going to add the styles that I want. And of course, we will have a button to toggle the theming of the application from light to dark, from dark to light. Again, as I said, it's not a course. This is not a course on CSS styling. We're not going to focus on the styles here. I will probably create a playlist on CSS. But as I told you, what we're basically doing is that we are creating some CSS variables with different values for light mode and dark mode, light theme and dark theme. And then we will have a way, we will define a function to toggle these, themes. So let's create these, margins for the paragraph tag and for the H3. The badge background color and color is also going to use those CSS variables. And we're done. Okay then. Now let's explore the code. I want to talk about host. So you remember we had host and host dark. Let's take a look at host and host dark. So as you can see here, we are defining some CSS variables, right? And we are setting the values for the CSS variables. Let's talk about them. So the host targets the custom element itself, book card. So when you define some, styles for the host, it means that you are targeting the book card component. The CSS custom properties, like for example, card BG are defined here. These variables are used inside of the components styles to allow flexible theming. So we've got different values for the CSS variables based on the light theme or the dark theme. Think of host as applying a style to the root wrapper of your component. Then we've got host dark. So this kicks in when the element has a dark attribute, something like this, applied to the element. So when the element has dark attribute added to this, we are going to use these styles. So it kind of overrides the CSS variables we defined in the root because we're switching to dark mode. So this makes it easy to toggle dark mode and light mode theming without duplicating a lot of styles. Just change the values of the CSS variables. So again, creating some CSS variables with some values for a light theme. Let me close out this one as well. And then creating the same, setting values for the same CSS variables, this time for the dark theme. And how do we know that these are going to get applied for a dark theme? Because we are, applying host with dark. So these styles are applied whenever the component is used with a dark attribute added to this. And then now that, we have defined these variables, we are going to use their values in the styles that we have. For example, for the card class, we are using the card BG, card text color, card shadow, and so on. So this is the way to apply theming. Now, using the dark theme, you can now toggle the dark theme attribute for the book card component in the book list component like this. So again, remember, in the book list, as you remember, we are defining the book card, component. So the idea now is that if I apply dark here, I can, switch to the dark theme of the book card component. This is the basic way to do this, but we want to have a more flexible way. Or toggle this dynamically in JS. Of course, you can, query the element and then you can toggle the attribute, dark attribute. But we want to apply the theme dynamically. We want to add a button that toggles the dark theme or light theme for our book card component. Since we're appending the book list dynamically in main.ts, we would need to modify the index.html. So if you remember, inside of the main.ts, we are creating this book list. We're appending this to the document, right? And inside of the book list, right, inside of the book list component, we are creating multiple instances of the book card. So now, inside of the index.html, I'm going to define this button. The ID is toggle theme button. Remember that ID, toggle theme button. So this button will be referenced in main.ts. And then inside of the main.ts, we're going to wait for the card to render. So we're going to defer execution using the set timeout for 100 milliseconds. And then we're going to target that button inside of index.html, toggle theme button. And then we are going to add, an event listener for that button. And then we are going to, kind of check whether we've got the word dark inside of the text content of the button. If we do not have that dark, we're going to toggle that dark, right? Toggle the dark theme. And then we are going to toggle the, let's say the content of the toggle button based on the theme that we are going to use. Now, take a look at this code, book list as any toggle theme, and then the, negated value, if you will, of the is dark. We need to define toggle theme inside of this book list as well. But before I do that, let me quickly go to index.html. And inside of the body, I am going to define that button. So this is the toggle theme. As you can see here, it doesn't do anything right now. If I go to main.ts, I am going to, apply that code for the, event listener thing. Let's get the reference to that button in the index.html, and let's add an event listener for this. So the next step would be to update the book list. As the book list component creates book cards inside of the render, and we don't see them yet, when the main.ts runs, we will need to update the book list. So inside of the book list, we are going to add that toggle theme, function. So again, this is the toggle theme function that we are invoking here, right? So the toggle theme is going to, query the book card components. And then for each book card is going to take a look at the is dark coming in the, let's say the, as the input parameter. And if is dark is truthy, we're gonna, set that attribute. Otherwise, we're gonna remove the dark attribute. So let me go to the book list component, and I'm going to add this function here, toggle theme. And we're done. Now we can test this. We can, click the toggle theme, and as you can see, the components are toggled in terms of their, themes, to dark theme and light theme. Now, the recap. In this episode, we kind of explored the concept of scope CSS in components. We revisited the concept of shadow DOM, and we now know how to apply, styles to components. We now know how to use CSS custom properties for dynamic theming, light theme, dark theme. And we know how to switch between the themes using this simple dark attribute added to our HTML element. And these are the basics of CSS encapsulation in web components. I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode, guys. If that's the case, as always, I'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up. And I will see you in the next one.